Divorce is hard enough, but missing out on thousands of Social Security benefits because you didn't know your options, that is something we want to help you avoid. Welcome to another episode of the Simply Retirement Podcast, where we want to empower and educate women to live your retirement on your terms. I'm your host, Eric Blake. In last week's episode, we talked with collaborative divorce attorney Jill Lowe, and we talked about the importance of understanding your financial resources before, during, and after divorce. Especially if you're in or near retirement, meeting with a financial planner who specializes in retirement income can be critical, especially when you're evaluating settlement options that may affect your future income sources. Just to be clear, Social Security benefits themselves cannot be negotiated. They're not going to be part of a divorce decree, but knowing what you're eligible for, and just as importantly, what could change if you're not careful, can be critical when you're negotiating everything else, from asset splits to retirement income. Now, regardless of what you may hear about the future of the program, Social Security still plays a foundational role in retirement income because it is still, for many women specifically, the single source of lifetime guaranteed income that will increase every single year. And the decisions you make, especially as it relates to divorce, about when and how to claim can have lasting consequences. Today, we're diving into what divorced women need to know about Social Security, not just eligibility, but we're going to talk about timing, strategy, and avoiding irreversible missteps. Joining me once again on this episode is Wendy McConnell. Wendy, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I am, as you could probably already tell from the start of this episode, we are at the end of week one of a 2-week stint with our granddaughter, and I'm feeling
Well, that explains a lot.
That does, doesn't it? So if you're just tuning in, I've had to redo some of these already. So we're getting through it though.
Well, we'll get that out though. You'll never know.
That's right.
But yeah, that's great. I mean, have you been having a blast?
It's been amazing. So, but for those of you who might be tuning on YouTube, I haven't shaved. I probably have yogurt on my shirt and I've got purple paint on my shorts. I can tell you that right now.
And how old is your granddaughter now?
She'll be 18 months old, 1.5 this month.
All right.
Yeah. So she is amazing. But I do think, here's what I think I've learned. I think the whole thing with grandparents saying that they spoil their child and then send them back, I don't think that's true. I think it's, you only have about 3 to 4 days of energy. So you got to get as much spoiling in as you can, and then you're done. You have no more energy left, so you give them back then. I don't think it's the whole spoiling them and then sending them back to their parents thing.
Well, I think maybe at that point you're so, tired, you just give them the cookies, you just
Exactly.
give them the ice cream. You're like, ah.
Well, so one of her favorite things is watching videos of herself. So she'll look at me and point at my phone and say, me?
Could you imagine if we did that when we were kids? I would constantly be staring at myself.
Yes. So it's been amazing. It's been a blast, but yes, I'm feeling week one and we got another week to go. So we're going to have to fight through it though.
Can't wait for next week. All right. So we're going to be talking about divorce. I'm going to pretend like I'm getting divorced, even though I am not getting divorced.
Okay.
So I will ask you all the questions that a divorced woman would want to know.
I think one of the things I want to share just a few, what I would call them just real life stories. And these are prospective clients that we've had conversations with. And I think it hopefully helps put some of these in perspective, because I think it's one of the things, I hate to call them mistakes, because I think it's really a flawed system to some extent. Lack of information, lack of education, whatever we want to call it, when it comes to making these decisions, because it's just not out there. You don't take a Social Security class in college. And as you get closer, you've got life, you've got kids, you got grandkids, you got all these different things. And then all of a sudden you find yourself either in the middle of a divorce or you're coming out of a divorce. And now you're saying, okay, well, Social Security should be pretty straightforward, right? Should be, hey, I claim and I'm good. But that's not necessarily the case. And it's often not the case. So a couple of things I wanted to share. And one is a story. It's a recently new client where she's getting out of obviously you're always getting out of these bad situations, right? So maybe years before you consider yourself not getting out of it, but it's still relatively new. Within the last 12 months, she's gotten a divorce, really emotional, really tough, a lot of back and forth. And this was unfortunately one of the things you can almost put it on the shoulders of the advisor, because, before the divorce was even over, he had recommended that she start Social Security benefits because she was eligible for Social Security on her own record. But in reality, just taking a step back and looking at her financial situation and what she most likely would have after the divorce was final, she would have had enough income to say she could have covered her basic needs for quite a while. And so one of the things that happened when she filed is, of course, she filed earlier than she could have. She could have actually delayed those benefits an extra couple of years and an extra 16% or so on those benefits. Now, it's not necessarily right or wrong either way. It's just that there wasn't really, from what she communicated to me, there wasn't a conversation about, hey, if you do this, just be aware of this. So I think that's one of the things you got to be aware of, is just understanding that when you're going through an emotional situation as it is with divorce, it's hard to look at all these things, but so that's why it's important to have an advisor on your side of the table that can help you evaluate those decisions for you and give you the information so you can make what I would call an educated decision. So for her, one of the things, in terms of just thinking about strategy, we're going to talk about 5 specific strategies here in a bit. But for her, we say, okay, let's step back and look at what you might be able to do. And back in episode 47, we talked about 3 little known Social Security strategies that might be available. One of which is could she just suspend benefits and say, hey, I'm going to stop them here. I'm going to let them keep growing, and I'm going to start them back up in a couple of years. That would be an option. She could also basically withdraw her application, say, hey, I'm going to pay back what I've received. Same thing, start from scratch and then let those benefits continue to grow. So that's a situation where, again, just knowing your options and having a conversation with a trusted advisor can be really valuable. So the second story, similar situations from an emotional perspective, coming out of a difficult divorce where she wasn't really in a situation where she was able to work. She didn't have a lot of influence on the financial decisions of the household. So when she got divorced, she finalized the divorce. She wanted to work. She didn't necessarily have to, but she wanted to. But you're also in that same kind of emotional condition of, hey, I probably need some income. I want to make sure I'm able to cover my bills. So you say, well, I'm 62. Let me just start my spousal benefits, or what at that point were ex-spousal benefits.
Okay.
Again, seemed logical, right? But because of she also making the decision to work, she didn't realize or didn't understand the earnings test. So what actually ended up happening is she earned enough to basically cover her bills, but she also earned too much for her Social Security benefits, which means she was going to have to pay a decent chunk back. So again, all logical decisions when you're going through it and thinking, okay, it gives me income, I can work, and can get feet on the ground, get my financial bearings set. Begin not understanding some of these rules when it comes to when to file, what I'm going to be eligible for, and some of these critical decisions that you have to make, especially now that you're on your own. And the last one I wanted to share is, this one's a little bit different in that the divorce happened quite a while back. From an age perspective, this particular client actually fell under what used to be some of these older rules where you could say, hey, I could actually file what's called a restricted application. I can file on my ex-spouse's benefits, but actually allow my own benefits to continue to grow. In her case, she, again, didn't know the strategy. So she said, well, I'm going to file, but she filed on her own benefit instead of her ex-spouse's, which means once she did that, that was basically it. She was now receiving her own benefit, but it was significantly less than what she could have gotten had she gone through that other process and gone through the other strategy of saying, okay, I'm going to file restricted on my divorced spouse, let mine grow until I'm 70, and it would have been significantly more. So my point of talking about this particular story is that now, as we're looking at her retirement situation and she's preparing to retire, the formulas are a lot different now than what they could have been, because now we've got to come up with other income sources. So it might be working a little bit longer, working part-time. It might be having to draw a little bit more out of her retirement assets, those types of things that today we're having to make these decisions because of we'll just call it a mistake in the past, but a mistake of not knowing, not understanding that that's even an option. And again, that's where I feel like the missed information, the lack of information out there is really what drives a lot of these decisions.
And you can't change your mind. You can't change it up. I mean, because it's such a costly mistake. So
not at this point. And that's the thing. And again, understanding the rules. So I'll refer back to episode 47, where that withdrawing the application, you have 12 months. When you file for benefits, you do have 12 months that you could withdraw that application, pay back whatever benefits you have received up to that point. But once you've passed that 12-month mark, that is it. You don't have any do-overs. You get that quick small little do-over window, but that's it. And then we start thinking about, okay, now that time has passed, how do we build around that now? How do we build around the decision that was made? Still make sure you have the lifestyle that you want in retirement, but we have to do it a little bit. We have to go about it in a little bit different way. That's where the tax planning becomes so much more important, and making those dollars last and paying as little in taxes as possible. Because, one of the things that will eventually happen is she will be eligible for a survivor benefit off of that ex-spouse. But we don't know when that's going to be.
Right. Okay.
As many divorced women would like to know when that might be, but we don't. But that's going to be the case. So she's going to be able to understand that, hey, that's going to be an additional income source at some point. We just don't know when it's going to be.
Okay. Gotcha.
So that gets us to our strategy. So we're going to talk about 5 specific strategies that divorced women need to know. And this is, I'm going to talk about, these are going to be more probably after divorce. Again, it's going to be very helpful to understand what these strategies are if you're going through a divorce right now, or you think you might be at some point down the road. But these are more things, understanding what happens after this has been completed. So the first thing is, this is number one, this is going to be the most important rule, and that is know and understand the 10-year rule for divorced spouse benefits, for benefits based on an ex-spouse.
Okay.
All right. So if you were married for 10 years and you are now divorced, you may be eligible for benefits based on that divorced spouse's record. Now, this could be ex-spousal benefits or survivor benefits. Now, again, there's a key distinction we have to make there, and that is ex-spousal benefits are when the ex-spouse is still alive. Survivor benefits are when the ex-spouse is deceased. Those are not the same. I hear that confusion a lot. And thinking about when I say the word ex-spouse, some people realize what it means, and that it's a benefit they can receive up to 50% of that ex-spouse's Social Security benefit, or they think it's the survivor benefit. But those are 2 separate benefits. You've got ex-spousal benefits and you've got survivor benefits. You only make sure you understand that distinction.
Okay.
So if you're unmarried, and we're going to talk about filing, I've already covered the basics here in the 10-year rule. But if you're unmarried, this may allow you to claim up to 50% of your ex-spouse's full retirement age benefit if it's higher than your own retirement benefit. For this, you got to be at least 62 still. So that 62 rule still plays. And we're going to talk about filing strategies and timing in just a little bit. But again, just understand that that's the ex-spousal benefit is up to 50%.
Not more. And
this actually was what came into play in one of the stories I was sharing, in that she was eligible. She was 62. She was eligible to receive a spousal benefit. But in terms of the timing, it just wasn't the right timing because she wanted to work and she didn't understand the earnings test component. Now, here's one. This is a really tricky piece of this Social Security puzzle that I always talk about because, with the frequencies, we just had a last episode talking about gray divorce and how the frequency of that. Well, actually, if you're getting married or you're getting divorced in your 50s and you happen to get remarried, one of the things that could happen is, well, I got divorced, I've gotten remarried, but maybe that marriage doesn't last 10 years. If I got remarried in my 50s, and maybe that marriage only lasts, 9 years, but I'm in my early 60s now. Well, if you happen to start spousal benefits off the current spouse and you divorce in less than 10 years, you actually could lose those spousal benefits. Those spousal benefits could stop.
So what about the first husband?
Right.
Or the first spouse?
So you might be if it depends on the circumstances. So again, it depends on whether that divorce or that marriage was 10 years or not. So that's where you got to look at, if you've got multiple marriages, how long do each of those marriages last, and which ex-spouse could I potentially be eligible for benefits based off of?
Okay. So say you have 2 that are over 10 years, can you pick which one you want?
Depends on, so again, if we're talking about ex-spousal benefits, which is 50% of that living ex-spouse's benefit themselves, as long as both were 10 years and you are not currently married, you pick the highest one.
Oh, but if you're married, you go with.
Right. Now we're back over to spousal benefits versus ex-spousal benefits. Correct.
Okay. But one more question.
Sure.
So if you're in year 7 of your current marriage, but you're 64 and you want to file, can you file X at that point? No, because you're married.
Once you've gotten married, you are no longer eligible for ex-spousal benefits, period. You're only eligible based on that current marriage.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Makes sense? A little more about as clear as mud?
Yeah, so you just don't get married again.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't worry about it. Okay, so now let's talk about remarriage, because this is again, it can be so tricky, and it is. There's so many stories that I've heard where it caught women off guard when it came to remarrying too soon. There's one story I heard where she was like a couple of months from turning 60. She got remarried because she didn't understand the rules. The ex-spouse passed away shortly after she turned 60. She might have been eligible for survivor benefits, but she wasn't. So it gets really complicated with this stuff. So I want to talk about, strategy 2 is just understanding the impact of getting remarried. So first thing to know is if you're remarrying before the age of 60, that will typically disqualify you from receiving divorced spouse benefits. Again, just what we talked about, because you're now married. But also, maybe we'll call it more importantly, if you're remarried before the age of 60, you're no longer eligible for survivor benefits based on a former spouse's record.
Okay.
So if you do have intentions of getting remarried, and again, we don't always want to make these decisions based on financial circumstances, but you got to be aware of these things. So if your ex-spouse is deceased, plan to get remarried after 60 if it's financially beneficial, or at least, again, understand the rules. So if you get married before the age of 60, you're ineligible for ex-spousal benefits. You're ineligible for ex-spouse survivor benefits, right? So if you remarry after age 60, again, at that point, you can still collect survivor benefits based on a deceased ex-spouse's record, even if you are married. So again, as long as that remarriage, that second marriage or third marriage, whatever it might be, happens after the age of 60, you're still going to be eligible for survivor benefits based on a previous spouse, should that spouse be deceased.
So we can turn the tables then on the men. We'll be like, when they told us when we were young, well, I'm not ready yet. I got to sow my wild oats. Now we're going to be like, hey, we got to wait till I'm 60. Sorry.
That's right. Hey, as you and I would probably agree, if there's financial benefit, he's probably going to be okay with that, right? So,
well, it depends on who it's for.
Yeah. So again, just one of those, critical pieces of understanding. If you're going to get remarried, which often happens, that's kind of what happens these days in terms of the averages. But just understanding, though, again, if we're talking about Social Security benefits, being aware of the ages that can impact your eligibility for these different benefits still becomes a big part of the puzzle.
Okay.
All right. So next, we're going to talk about survivor benefits being more valuable than spousal benefits, depending on the circumstances. So again, we talked about this. If your ex-spouse is deceased and you meet those eligibility criteria. So we talked about the 10-year rule, that if you have to have been married for at least 10 years, you have to be over age 60. So this is, again, some of the key distinguishing pieces of the survivor benefits versus the ex-spousal benefits. If you're at least age 60, survivor benefits, you can actually be eligible for survivor benefits as early as age 60 versus retirement benefits on your own record or ex-spousal benefits being 62. You could actually qualify for survivor benefits as early as age 60, which can be up to as much as 100% of that ex-spouse's benefit versus the 50%. Again, always keeping in mind, we're going to talk about timing here in just a second, but when we're talking about timing, the earlier you start any benefit, yours, spousal benefits, ex-spousal benefits, survivor, the earlier you start, the lower your benefit's going to be from that point forward, right? It's also important to know that you can even switch strategies with survivor benefits. And what I mean by that is, depending on the circumstances and the age at which that individual deceased, you can claim survivor benefits first and then later switch to your own benefit, or vice versa. You can start with your own benefit and then switch to survivor benefits. In most cases, what you're looking at doing is delaying the larger of the two benefits the longest.
So they can build up.
So whichever benefit is higher, you want to delay that one as long as possible.
Okay. Because that'll build up, right?
Right. So survivor benefits, again, so you can start them as early as age 60, but the maximum benefit is almost always, in most circumstances, going to be age 67 or full retirement age. Or your own benefit, you can start as early as 62, but it maximizes the highest benefit at age 70. So if your own benefit happens to be higher than your survivor benefit would be, you could say, well, depending on your work, what your working situation is, I might start survivor benefits at 65. And then when I turn 70, I'm going to switch to my own, because my benefit will continue to grow all the way to age 70, but I'll still have that income starting at 65 from my survivor benefit. Or I might say I'm going to start my benefit at 62, if I'm in a position to do so, allow my survivor benefit to continue to grow. And then at 67, I'm going to file for my survivor benefit. So you have that ability to switch from one benefit to another when we're talking about your own benefit versus survivor benefits. And that's what's going to help you maximize your overall Social Security benefit.
Okay.
And again, that's where it's going back to the case that I talked about, where the client filed for her own benefit rather than filing for restricted benefit off of an ex-spouse. But at some point, she's going to be eligible to switch from her own benefit to that higher survivor benefit whenever that time comes.
Okay.
Now, here's one I get a lot of when it comes to ex-spouse benefits. Here's a question I get a lot, and that is, what happens? Does the ex-spouse know, or does the ex-spouse benefit get impacted if I file for benefits off their record? And the answer is no. So again, many women will worry about this, and not necessarily that they're worried about what they're going to think or anything like that, but just if it was a difficult divorce, an emotional divorce, they think, well, do I have to call this person and ask them questions, or are they going to find out if I do this and they're going to call me? So the bottom line is, none of that matters. Their benefits not getting impacted. They don't even know that you've done it. If you're eligible for benefits, you might have to provide documentation. So you may a marriage certificate and a divorce decree to prove you're eligible for these benefits, but they're never going to know. Not only does it not impact your ex's benefit, if they're currently married, it also doesn't impact their current spouse's benefit, or even previous ex-spouses. So it's really focusing on what's best for you. So, and understanding your situation and what's going to be your best option, whether it's, again, ex-spousal benefits or survivor benefits. They don't have to know that you've done anything. They don't have to get their permission. You don't have to do anything. Just prove that you're eligible, file for what you're eligible for, and go from there.
They want nothing to do with the ex. Once they're done, they want to be done.
Right. And you hope there's a friendly situation there, but unfortunately that's not always the case.
Not always.
Again, the biggest worry, and again, whether you're worried about it because you care about them or you're worried about it because you don't care about them, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
The biggest thing is just making the best decision for you and knowing that it doesn't impact them one way or the other.
Got it. And he won't even know. So that's the best news possible.
Exactly. All right. So now this is, I don't know to call this the primary strategy here, but timing is everything. And that's when we want to talk about filing for benefits, especially what the impact is of filing for early reduced benefits. So again, anytime you file for any type of benefit before your full retirement age, it is going to permanently reduce your ex-spousal benefits, your survivor benefits, or your own benefit. That's just the way it's going to be. As an example, though, for a divorced spousal benefit, if you take it at 62, it's going to be reduced to about 32.5% of your ex-spouse's full retirement age benefit, where the maximum benefit would be 50%. And that could be a pretty significant difference. If you're talking about, if the ex-spouse's benefit is $3,000, 50% of that is $1,500. Well, if I'm down to closer to, $1,000, that extra few $100 a month can make a significant difference. Now, again, depending on cash flow, you always have to evaluate these based on your individual cash flow situations. But just know, the earlier you file, the more your benefit is going to get reduced. Now, here's a really key point when it comes to ex-spousal benefits being different than spousal benefits. And that is, for you to file for ex-spousal benefits, you have to be 62. Your ex-spouse has to be 62, and the divorce has to have been at least 2 years ago. But the ex-spouse does not have to have filed for their own benefit.
Oh, okay.
Makes sense? So if you're married, you can't file for spousal benefits until your spouse has filed.
Right.
That's not the case for ex-spousal benefits. So again, depending on the circumstances, your ex-spouse only has to be age 62 or greater, and the divorce has to be at least 2 years ago, at least 2 years old. And in that case, you can actually file for benefits whether they filed or not.
Okay, that's good news.
And basically, it's not so that you don't get penalized for whatever decisions they might make.
Right.
That's the bottom line. So
because they might not file until they're 70.
Right. That could be exactly the case. Or they filed, or worst case, they filed early. They filed at 62.
Oh.
And so it doesn't impact you. So again, you have the ability to base your own benefit off of what's best for you, not what any bad decision or good decision, either way, whatever decision they may have made, you're not dependent on whatever that decision was.
Okay.
So that can be a critical factor, especially if we're talking about a cash flow situation where, again, you've got a limited work history, the divorce is finalized, it's a couple of years old, and you're in a position where I need income. And he's decided to delay benefits, whatever the case might be. That gives you a chance to make that decision. Okay, does it make sense for me to start my income?
Right.
Now, again, with survivor benefits, again, you can take benefits as early as age 60 or even age 50 if you happen to be disabled. So again, survivor benefits are age 60 versus your retirement benefits being 62. But again, if you start benefits early, you start them as early as age 60, it's going to be significantly reduced from what your full potential benefit might be. So that's where we really got to make sure we're understanding what these rules are. And that's not, again, so many times, unfortunately, it's an emotional decision to say, well, I'm just going to do it, rather than looking at all your options, in which case delaying benefits is always going to result in a higher benefit down the road. And so you want to try to, at least as best you can, just be able to step back, consider what your options are and what's going to make the most sense as to when you file. And ideally, talk to a financial advisor to make sure that you understand what your options are, to lay those out and say, okay, here's what your option one would be. Here's the pros and cons. Here's option two. Here's what the pros and cons are. Here's option three. What are the pros and cons? So again, you can make hopefully an educated decision versus an emotional decision when it comes to any of these options that may be available to you after a divorce is final.
Okay. That's good to have options.
It is. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like I said, from the very beginning, it's just understanding what these options are. And you feel like you only have this one single thing I can do. In most cases, that's not going to be correct. So being able to know who to ask, where to ask, whether, again, it's a financial advisor, whether it's your attorney, have them connect you to a financial advisor, especially if you're in the middle of going through a divorce or it hasn't been finalized. There's what are called CDFAs, Certified Divorce Financial Analysts, that can help with some of these things. As Jill in our conversation last week talked about, talk to a financial planner who has experience with a retirement income to lay out what your options may be in that case to help you negotiate. Maybe that gives you a little bit more negotiating power when it comes to how the assets are going to be separated. How much are you going to get of the retirement assets? Depending on what the circumstances are, does one spouse have more retirement assets in their name than the other? And how do we end up getting those assets split in a manner that's appropriate for you?
Okay, got it.
And again, like I said at the very beginning, Social Security is not negotiable. That's not something you negotiate, either eligible or you're not. But understanding what your options are going to be or what your Social Security picture will look like might give you more ability to evaluate some of these other assets that might help provide income down the road.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So just a quick recap of what we talked about. So again, you may be eligible for ex-spousal or ex-spousal survivor benefits if you've been married at least 10 years. Again, that's a key date. And it is exactly 10 years at a minimum. There's no 9.5 years, 9.25, 9.1. It is 10 years. It has to be exactly 10 years because you're going to have to provide a divorce decree, a marriage certificate and a divorce decree to verify your eligibility. So again, it's important to understand that. Getting divorced before the 10-year mark could mean you lose benefits you're already receiving. Right? So if you've started spousal benefits and your marriage ends before that 10-year mark, you might actually lose those spousal benefits. And if you don't have earnings on your own record, you may basically be out of Social Security benefits completely at that point. So again, it's something to be aware of as you start planning what your future is going to look like. We talked about claiming too early can reduce your income for life. If possible, and this is a very individualized decision, delaying may be your best long-term option. If that's something that you can do. Again, if it's a cash flow situation and you're down to, you're pinching every penny, again, at least make an educated decision about whether, this is the best option for me is to go ahead and just start my benefits. We talked about remarriage timing can impact your eligibility as well. So if you're planning to get remarried, just understanding what the rules are, what those ages are, what those critical ages are. We talked about survivor benefits that can be substantial, but aren't guaranteed in timing. So you want to plan conservatively with that. So if you're going to be eligible for survivor benefits off of an ex-spouse, just have an idea of kind of what that impact's going to be and know that it's out there. But again, it's not something we can plan because we just don't know when it's going to happen.
Right.
If you work before full retirement age, again, your benefits could be reduced by the earnings test. If you earn above a certain amount, it could actually impact your benefits that you're receiving currently. Now, it's important to know that you don't lose those benefits permanently. They're simply delayed. They're recalculated into your benefit once you reach full retirement age. So you do get those benefits back. The hard part is if I had to write a big check in 2025 and then I'm not getting anything back until, say, 2030.
Right.
And then it's just recalculated versus I don't get a lump sum in 2030. It's just recalculated back into my monthly benefits. I might have to write a check for, $10,000. I've heard stories of up to $50,000 I had to write a check back for $50,000 because that's how much I made. So again, just understanding the earnings test can be pretty impactful and also understanding what your options are when it comes to some of these things, that if I did maybe make a mistake, do I have the option to withdraw my application? Again, I might have to pay all those benefits back, but it might be my better option. Can I suspend benefits and stop my benefits now? Now that's only available to you at full retirement age, but it's something to be aware of. So again, some of these key strategies that a lot of people aren't aware of. So I think that's kind of the key takeaway. That's what I wanted to make sure we got out of this episode. Wendy, any other thoughts, questions in terms of just the action items for today's episode?
No, I just want to tell women to wait until 60.
Right. I base everything on financial decisions. That's always a good route.
Exactly. It's all about the money. No, I'm all good.
Well, thank you once again for joining me on this episode, Wendy. Thank you to our audience for tuning in as well. If you are getting divorced, again, be sure to consult a financial planner, a financial coach, a certified divorce financial analyst that can provide insight on your options before that divorce is settled. If you're on the other side of divorce and you're trying to put the pieces of your new retirement puzzle together and you're looking for a personalized retirement plan that helps you make smart decisions around income, investments, and taxes, especially after divorce, visit getmysimplyretirementroadmap.com to schedule your free retirement assessment. That is it for today's episode. As a reminder, for all the links and resources mentioned today, you can go to the simplyretirementpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, follow, and share our show. Until next time, please remember, retirement is not the end of the road. It's the start of a new journey.
That's it for today's episode of the Simply Retirement Podcast. We hope you found our insights and advice helpful in planning for a fulfilling retirement. Don't forget to take action on what you've learned today. Visit our website at blakewealthmanagement.com to learn more about our firm and review our Simply Retirement Roadmap process to get you on the right path to the retirement you deserve. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to helping you achieve your retirement goals. Remember, retirement is not the end of the road. It is the start of a new journey. So embrace it and make the most of it. Until next time, take care. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security, or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Blake Wealth Management. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Blake Wealth Management or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor, Blake Wealth Management, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.